You are a special agent with the power to shift, a short teleportation technique that allows you to appear instantly a few feet away, even if you travel through walls. Your mission? To complete the ultimate heist, using your abilities to take down any threat in your way as you climb to the top of the most secure building in the world. I'm Thomas from wisegamer.com, and this is my review of Mr. Shifty, a game releasing tomorrow, April 13th, 2017, from Team Shifty and tinyBuild Games. The story of Mr. Shifty is pretty short and simple, and I'll try to keep this overall review fairly short for you guys as well, because I know it's a new game and you just want to hop right into it. So, that said, the story goes that basically you are an agent that has a superpower to teleport short distances. This includes teleporting through walls, obstacles, and things like that, and the game calls this a shift. You are Mr. Shifty. The rest of the story is that this evil leader is sitting at the top of the world's most secure building and is looking to create a weapon. You have to pull off basically the ultimate heist and break into this ultra secure building with over 18 stages and 140 levels to stop this from happening. Now, moving into gameplay, the general flow is that you move through each level as fast as possible, knocking out all the enemies on the floor, then moving to the next section. Some floors have an extra objective, like maybe you have to hack into a computer or something like that, but for the most part, this is what you do, is you clear the floor of all the enemies, move into the next area, and then basically you go that way until you complete the entire stage, which will end up with you in an elevator, which allows you to move up to the next floor. Each stage has a final zone which culminates in some kind of tricky or complicated room. It might be really difficult to where there's just a lot of guys that you have to kill, but sometimes there's ways around it and kind of an almost puzzle-like mechanic where you can maybe shift around into a different way, hack a computer, and send a laser beam through the room that will kill everyone in there for you. Little things like this make the game a little bit more interesting to me. A lot of people have compared it to Hotline Miami, and they're not really wrong. It's similar to the Hotline Miami series, but with a superpower to shift and a few other elements that I really liked about it as well. Now, you do have a few abilities as well, and though the gameplay does seem simple, it's actually really addicting and fun. The levels have these various items you can pick up and use to throw at different enemies, or as one-hit melee attacks and things like that too. There's also various traps like I mentioned, so there's like the lasers that you either need to circumvent or sometimes they'll be in your favor to be able to kill enemies for you. And some of those traps even act like puzzle mechanics, like I said, which kind of just adds to the gameplay. There's one level, for example, early on where I just had to basically outrun a continuous line of lasers trying to kill me. And in addition to that, though, there was enemies along the way shooting at me, and it's pretty much a game where if you get shot, you're done. So you have to shift and constantly dodge these enemies, but if you take too long, the lasers will hit you. It just adds a lot more fun to the gameplay and more elements to it as well. As I mentioned before, there's around 18 stages and 140 levels. So what that means is the level portion of it are the different zones I'm talking about within a stage, and then the stage itself is the different floors of this big skyscraper that you're climbing. So there's definitely a wide variety that you'll come across and a lot of different mechanics you'll see as you progress through the game. It's a lot of fun. Now, visually, the game's fairly average in my opinion. There's nothing terrible about it, not by any means at all, but there's also nothing that really stands out either. It's a top-down game with a minimalistic approach, and those textures kind of come off a bit comic book-like to me, which is completely fine. It's the theme of the secret agent with superpowers, and really, again, that's fine for me. It wasn't displeasing by any means, but there wasn't really a whole lot to talk about here otherwise. There's some cool effects that I'll mention later. There's things like punching a bad guy through one of the exterior windows has them do a falling animation, they plummet to their death, or little things like this that just added a nice touch to the visuals. But again, nothing to really discuss. It was above and beyond what you see in other games. Audio-wise, it's pretty much the same story as the visuals. It's good, you can buy the soundtrack off Steam, and I think it adds a lot to the gameplay, but it wasn't something that particularly blew me away by any means. I do have to say that when you complete a stage, you end up in that elevator to the next floor, and the elevator music kicks on, and the first time I did it, it was so hilarious to me, that change of pace, and you hear the typical elevator music, like similar to The Girl from Ipanema that you always hear. If you don't know that song, Google it, you'll know it instantly if you've ever been in an elevator. But basically, it just kind of gave a little bit of comic relief to lighten the tension, and I really liked that portion of it. I feel like any of the recent games tinyBuild has published have had some great soundtracks, and this one's not a disappointment either, but it also wasn't something that I felt needed to be the main focus of the review, as it was just something that added a little bit of touch to the ambiance and made the game feel more polished overall. All the little effects like the gunshots and the grunting and things like that, the shifty noise, those sound effects are all great there as well. Again, very typical. It was a polished game in my opinion with the audio, but nothing above and beyond that made me say, wow, this is the best piece of music I've ever heard or anything like that. Great soundtrack, worth buying if you're into that type of style of music. Otherwise, it'll just be another thing that adds to the game. Now, moving into one of my favorite areas, replayability. I always like to talk about this in my reviews, as you guys know, and with Mr. Shifty, I really feel the game can be played through multiple times. I'm not an achievement hunter like you guys know, but with this game there's really not too many achievements on Steam, so I feel like I might actually go back and play through a few times and pick up some of the ones that I've been missing. It's really not some insurmountable task to look at when you start comparing to games that have 50 plus achievements or all these collectibles and things like that. I mean, here I think there's 14 achievements in the game, which is enough for me to go back and say, hey, I'm only a few off, let's go ahead and complete those. There's also a timer that shows up at the end of each game, or at the end of each level, I should say. So basically, you know, if you're into speed running or if you want to see how fast you can get through the level, there's kind of that mechanic as well, which added a little bit more fun to it as well. Overall, I'm really excited for Mr. Shifty to hit the mass market tomorrow. It's one of the indie titles coming to the Nintendo Switch, and I think it will play really well there with the controls. And of course, it's coming to Steam as well. Being one of those games that you can kind of just hop in and out of fairly easily. I mean, the levels aren't too long overall, and you get different save points and things like that. So I think it'll be great for the portability of the Switch as well as the home console portion of it. And then of course, as a PC game, that's where I'm playing it here, and it's going to be great on Steam. I definitely recommend picking it up tomorrow if you can, or if you see this video sometime in the future and you haven't picked it up yet, go ahead and get it. I've been Thomas from wisegamer.com, and I hope you enjoyed my review of Mr. Shifty. We'll see you next time.